I hope
Hi.
that.
Hi. Oh, we have. I just heard someone. Hi. Who's this?
Hello.
This is Matthew.
Matthew.
Hi,
Hi.
Matthew.
Thanks for calling.
How's it going?
Oh, just fine.
Okay. Hey, can somebody remind me? Like, is the Skype address showing up on the screen? By the way, can you tell me? Is it just the Atheist Experience, all one word? Okay, that's where you're gonna Skype to, and that is where Matthew has Skyped to, and we're glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me. I actually called in, and you guys were both the hosts when I called in, but I had called in after the show was over, so it wasn't on air. But I asked the same question I'm asking this time, which was about political and religious violence. And I know Martin Wagner had given a really good answer to me, and I actually wanted to see if you'd be willing to reiterate his answer, like what he had discussed last time.
No, we're different people, so we're going to give a terrible answer.
Yeah. No, I'm actually. You're going to have to refresh my memory a bit on the discussion.
I have no idea what you asked.
Yeah, because it's actually it's been a while since I've been on the show, but I go ahead.
What's your question?
The question was, how do we differentiate between political and religious violence? And it was along the lines of like talking about the debate between Noam Chomsky and Sam Harris and like Bill Maher, Glenn Greenwald, and those kind of people.
I probably have a different opinion about this than Matt does, but I do not think there's a big difference between political and religious violence. It's basically obsession with a particular ideology to the point that you are willing to get violent for it. What do you think, Martin?
Well, at a baseline level, I think that's dead right. I think that. Okay. I think I know what you may be talking about in terms of like the answer I gave you before. Political and religious violence go hand in hand very frequently. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think that it is. There are people out there, for example, who blame Islamist violence solely on the fact that the actors are Muslim, right? And they're working on some sort of Quranic decree that all infidels and heathens must be slaughtered out of hand, right. And that's really all that they're working on. And so, and I think that those people who believe that about Islamist violence really are missing the big picture, because it's not simply that. There are political realities such as, for example, the West's relationship to, for example, the Arab world in the Middle East versus Israel. There are issues pertaining to who gets the oil and everything else.
Which is not to say that we would ever blame.
No.
The victims of religious or political violence on the people who are the recipients of the victims. Yeah, but oftentimes the motivations are more complex than people make them out to be.
Right. It's never just one thing, and that's usually what I point out. And of course, whenever I point this out, those same people who don't really want to hear that the issues are more complex, they ridiculously will accuse you of being like an apologist for Islam or something like that, which is just mindless. It's just an acknowledgement that what is going on is multifaceted. Because if it were just, Muslims hating on anybody who wasn't Muslim just to do it, we would have seen this kind of, Islamist terrorism, this kind of violence that we have seen essentially since the rise of Al-Qaeda and 9/11. We'd have been seeing this kind of thing specifically for ages, right? And we haven't really quite seen it in this extreme form until quite recently. There's ISIS is just it's next level stuff that's never really been experienced before, and it's recent. Again, I lived in when I was a child. I lived in Dubai for 3 years. With my family. My dad was in the oil business. And so, I had this firsthand interaction with Muslims on their own, in their own turf. At that time, you would not have found a more, pro-American, pro-free enterprise friendly bunch of folks, right? So if Islam is just this thing that, like a hypodermic needle, makes all of its adherents go, oh, you're not Muslim, well, I have to kill you now. I probably wouldn't be sitting in this chair. So it's very short-sighted to just blame extremely complex, events on a sole cause.
Right. There are a lot of different things that go into people's motivations for acting. There are, I mean, religious doctrine is certainly one of them, and there have historically been no shortage of, for instance, Christian terrorist acts.
And it can't be denied that it is the madrasas over there, and it is the religion that is being used as the tool to radicalize. These young fighters and strap bombs to themselves and things like that.
Right.
So it is a tool. It is an element.
So you've got religious ideology, and then you have the degree to which you take that religious ideology seriously. And also, some people are maybe more prone to commit acts of violence, to look for excuses to commit acts of violence than others. There are certainly a lot of non-religiously motivated acts that I would refer to as terrorism that have taken place in the United States periodically. Like, for instance, when somebody goes and I think the most recent one that was kind of a big deal was that some guy went into a theater that was playing the Amy Schumer movie Trainwreck, which was hilarious, by the way, but that's not the point. And he did he succeed in shooting a lot of people? I can't keep them all straight.
I think he shot I think he only had a couple of fatalities. He shot several people. I don't think there were as many as fatalities as say like the Batman shooting or anything like that.
Yeah, but I mean, there are a lot of complex things that go into people's motivation for doing very stupid things, and religion certainly is a big factor in a lot of them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not saying that religious violence isn't a thing, but it's just saying that in most cases it's just one ingredient in a giant toxic pie. I like that imagery, toxic pie. I like that imagery. I'm gonna.
It sounds.
So I guess
Go ahead.
The other part of my question is like, I've heard y'all, well, maybe not necessarily you two, but the Atheist Experience hosts or whatever talk about. Whenever people, they'll claim like, atheist regimes have caused, such and such violence or whatever. And they'll talk about like, that was more of like statist violence, or that was like communism or this or that. And those kinds of dogmas. And so I guess what I'm wondering is like, if you think like, for instance, that a lot of the violence that happens in like, say like the Middle East nowadays, more modern violence or whatever, terrorism, that kind of thing. Do you think that a big part of that is mostly due to like state violence, like coming from possibly the United States and its allies, like directed towards, and all that, the history that we've had with that? Like, is there a state interest?
I mean, are you asking, is the violence that's being committed state-sponsored violence, or are these?
Or is it a reaction to?
Yeah, I guess I'm not quite sure.
Political? I mean, I think if there's one thing I hope to make clear from our other answers is it's all that stuff, and it's maybe above my pay grade to give, which is nothing, to give one single answer to that question.
Yeah, let me try to see if I phrase this just right. In situations where, because this is always, it's a big point that Christians love to bring up. Oh, Joseph Stalin killed, 28 billion and 3 people, so, take that, atheist. First off, I don't think, it's always good to point out, look, I don't know that any of us as atheists are claiming that atheism is the path to some sort of moral perfection, in the same way that religionists like to claim that adopting their religion is a path towards that sort of thing. But setting aside what may or may not have motivated guys like Stalin and Pol Pot and what have you, you can say to them, all right, I'm an atheist, and I'm not out there, launching pogroms to, slaughter 20 million people. I mean, I can barely balance a checkbook. So, but I just have no interest in that sort of thing. So then, So what do you have to say to that? So obviously, if you can get, it is entirely possible, an atheist megalomaniac who is a violent psychotic dictator. Well, here we are being atheists, not being that kind of megalomaniac. And if you get the Christian to acknowledge that point, then so it's like, yes, so you can, so that's why, yes, it's important to say you can't, so why would you think that the actions of Osama bin Laden would represent every single Muslim? Why would you think that the actions of Torquemada, or a particular, Catholic, child molesting priest would represent, all Christians or all Catholics or what have you? It's important, I think, to recognize the crimes of religions and the crimes of ideologies. But I would like to think that atheists are maybe a little bit more careful in trying not to make a blanket, a statement that everyone is guilty by association of these sorts of deeds. But all I could say is that if some atheist came out and did horrible crimes and said, this is all because I'm an atheist, I would still call that person a bad man and an asshole, and I would seek to have him prosecuted and whatever else. It would. Yeah. That he would be another atheist would have no bearing on that.
Right.
Whatever excuse he wanted to make.
I'm going to put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah.
There have been cases where people came out, where people who were clearly atheists committed terrible crimes and may or may not have been motivated by those opinions, like that Craig Hicks guy, like last year, who shot a bunch of Muslim kids. It was not entirely conclusive what his motive was, but certainly he said on his page he was a fan of the Atheist Experience. He
had various anti-Muslim rants.
He killed some Muslims. And I'm not saying that he was motivated by that, but I do say, to the extent that he might have been, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So, we are not honor-bound to defend him just because he's one of us.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we going to move on?
I think we should, yes.
Thanks for calling.
Yes, thanks very much for the call.